annual activities. A couple of weeks ago, the Historical Marker Commission for the Division of Historic Resources approved our application for a historical marker commemorating the founding of Tallahassee that will go in Cascades Park. At the same time, the committee approved a city-sponsored marker for Centennial Field. That is 4 of our 10 planned markers that have been approved. I expect there to be 3 more on the agenda at the next meeting, so we're well on our way to getting these done. Thanks for all sorts of people for helping us make progress on this. You may have heard, but there is a big party planned for New Year's Eve down at Cascades Park to kick off the bicentennial, starting at 6 o'clock. I hope as many of us who can be there. It really is a community-wide event, I think, that's going to last most of the year. Then on January the 11th, which is the same day as our next meeting, it's going to be Bicentennial Day at the state capitol from 10 till 2 in the afternoon. And yes, we will have a table there, the Historical Society will. So come by and join us, help us promote the bicentennial. You all know some of the events that we have planned for this year. February 23rd through 25th, we will be sponsoring a bicentennial antiquarian book fair down at the Elks Club on Magnolia Drive. And I understand that we've got 20 or 25 book dealers from around the South already committed to this. And so if you love books, don't know anybody like that. If you know books, if you collect books, if you're a bookaholic like I am, you will want to be there. Then on March 21st and 22nd, in this room here, we will be holding a historians conference on territorial Florida. We have brought in 8 very prominent historians from around the state, folks like Mike Denham from down at Florida Southern, Larry Rivers from over at FAMU, Tracy Revels from up at Wofford in South Carolina, all talking on a different aspect of this area during its territorial period. So that'll be 2 days, four speakers on each day, the 21st and 22nd. And of course that will lead into the History Festival, which will be on Kleeman Plaza on the 23rd. So there's going to be a lot of history going on. A lot of history going on this year. There are other projects we're working on, as you all know, including an interactive online history of territorial Florida for elementary students. Theater with a Mission is working on all sorts of performances and reenactments. So, take your vitamins this year. Plan to be part of this. It's really going to be something. Finally, as soon as they get their food, let me put my glasses on to see if they have gotten their food. I would like to ask 2 of our members, Bill Lessman and Lynn and Marion McClarty, to come join me up here at the podium. And they'll come, I think, because that Marjorie will rouse them up and make them. Oh yeah, that will be the last thing. Yes, Doug's already done. Every so often, our board will decide that someone's contribution to the Historical Society on many levels Is such that they should be awarded a lifetime membership to this organization. That means we won't hassle them to renew their membership every year, among other things. This year we awarded 4 lifetime memberships, only 2 of whom could be here tonight. One of them is to Mary Catherine May. And many of you all know Mary May. She has been on our board. She's a former teacher. But Mary, along with a number of people in this room, is a researcher extraordinary, particularly on the subject of the post-Civil War Black community in Tallahassee. She's written a number of books on that. Whenever I get an email for a historical question, I usually forward it to 4 or 5 people. Doug Smith, of course, Claude, Matt Lutz, Lynn, and Mary is always one. I'm very pleased that we did this for Mary. I mean, she was thrilled the other day when I presented her certificate to her, and she doesn't travel at night. She made that clear to me. So, but we'll get her to one of these meetings so far. Another one of our lifetime members, new lifetime members, is Alva Stone. Alva Stone was our treasurer for a number of years for the Historical Society, and this year she made a very substantial financial contribution to the Historical Society in the name of Mary Alma Lang, Dave's wife, whom you all know passed earlier this year, a couple of months ago. And her daughter is giving birth this week, and so I said, well, stay with your daughter, and so I'll get her certificate. For those who did show up tonight, Bill Leslie has made several very generous financial donations over the years. The latest to underwrite the publication of the latest issue of Appalachian, our magazine, which has not been published for 27 years. Bill is probably sitting there thinking, where the hell is it? I gave my money, so what's going on? Well, what's going on is that it is in the final stages of production, even as we speak. Every time we think it's ready to go to the printer, either Casey or Rebecca or I go, oh, we need to fix so-and-so. We do have every intention of having it, here for you, for our members at the January 11th meeting. So it's really very generous of Bill to have done that. And there's a picture in the magazine of him handing the check over, and we've got a couple of scraggly people in that picture. So, and then finally, Lynn and Miriam McClarty. Lynn is a member of our board, and Lynn also, they also have made very generous financial contributions to the Historical Society, particularly for our historical marker program. And Lynn, let me tell you, this thing would not be proceeding as it is without Lynn's help. Lynn has done much more than the finances on this. He has helped the wording on these markers. He's helped us pester the various people who needed to give permission for us to put it on their property. And so these are all 4 very special people. And I am honored beyond measure to give them this small token of esteem for all of their help. And so Lynn and Miriam, this is for you. And Bill, this is for you. And I just give them a hand. One more thing before I introduce Barbara. is Sandler Dixon. Sandler's here. Sandler, stand up. I don't know whether Frank Terra Firma is here tonight or Bob Knight, but no, you don't get to speak. Sorry. You can wait.
I'll take that chair and go home.
Back when we started planning for the bicentennial 4 years ago, we had no idea that the pandemic was going to be as severe as it was, that it was going to basically shut down things for quite some time. And one of the questions about the bicentennial was whether anyone was going to have the wherewithal or the ability to do something that had been done at both the centennial 100 years ago and the sesquicentennial 50 years ago. And that is to build a reproduction of Tallahassee's, of Florida's first state capitol building, which was a log cabin, as you all know. It's our symbol. It's the Historical Society's logo. And 3 or 4 people, took charge of this and pushed it. And Sandler was one of them, and Frank Terra Firma is one of them, and Bob Knight is one of them. And last Monday, I guess it was, we got word from Mayor Daley that the city is going to build this log cabin. We're going to make the official announcement on the 17th at the city commission meeting. It will be put in Cascades Park, which is an excellent location for it. And this is, part of the tradition, I think. It's one of the things that sticks with us. And so Sandler, anybody here who knows Sandler's like an old bulldog. He gets his teeth in something. He will not give up. And he got this done. He and Frank and Bob got this done. I just think it's great. So that's all I have to say tonight. Before the food gets cold, I would like to introduce Barbara. Many of you all, how many of you all, see a show of hands, how many of you all know Barbara Mattick? Yeah, a good number of people. The first time I met Barbara, it was, 23 years ago, during my own very brief tenure at the Department of State. She came up to me one day, shook her finger in my nose and said, "The church you are attending," and she didn't name the church, but I knew what she was talking about. She said, "The church that you are attending is about to lose its status on the National Register of Historic Places because it is making some changes to its architecture and so forth. You better speak to those people." So I have no say in that. But,
just moved here.
Yes. but there you go. Barbara's been working on, she's a public historian for a number of years. She's worked on a number of projects. Her latest one is this very wonderful project and book that she published on the Sisters of St. Joseph, a French nunnery, that's not right, but a French order, thank you, who came to Florida at the end of the Civil War with the expressed purpose of setting up schools and helping the freedmen, get on in their lives, and it's quite a remarkable story. So I immediately asked her to come speak to us. I have to tell you, though, I had second thoughts about this because I discovered later that Barbara had actually written another book. Barbara wrote a history of toothbrushes. And I thought, why are you talking about toothbrushes? That's what we all want to hear. So we'll have her back to talk about that. But I'm very pleased to turn the podium over to Barbara Mattick, and thank you very much.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. And let me ask you, how many of you are familiar with Catholicism? Maybe you went to Catholic school, or you know nuns, or you're related to a nun?
I lived in Nineveh.
You got it.
You what?
I lived in Nineveh.
Well, you were around a lot of them then. Well, I think there are a lot of people that they don't. A lot of people just want to know about nuns. I mean, it's a curious thing. Who are they? What are they really like? You just hear about them. And in the course of working on my PhD in history, I ended up trying, well, I had to find a dissertation topic. And it was going to be about yellow fever, which I'd been studying before that. But then, when I was taking a women's history class under Elna Green, I don't know if any of you know her, I wanted to find some women that were involved somehow with yellow fever. And it turns out that the Sisters of St. Joseph were, and they, some of them died treating yellow fever patients over in Jacksonville, in the 1888 epidemic, and in Fernandina before that in 1877. So I never really thought about women's history before because it wasn't a thing. When I was working on my master's in history back in 50 years ago, that is now, there wasn't anything, such a thing as women's history. But I was taking a women's history class because Elna was also over the Florida history program. And so I wanted a topic related to women to tie in with the yellow fever. And so that's why I ended up doing a dissertation, because I found them much more interesting once I got into it, on the Sisters of St. Joseph. Now, one of the things that I learned very early on in my research is that there is a difference between nuns and sisters. Since the 12th century, women who served the Catholic Church in a formal way have been recognized. Given the role of women and the customs of the time in the 12th century, they were limited to prayer and worship. They were enclosed in convents away from the secular world. And they lived out their vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience to God and to their supervisors, superiors. And such women religious are called nuns. We still have nuns like that. If you heard of Carmelite nuns, they're an example of what is called a contemplative order. And so they don't go out into the public. In the 17th century, because of the many wars, famines, plagues, and of that time, some women really longed to go out to take care of the poor and other sorts of people who were in need, such as in schools, hospitals, and orphanages. And those women religious, once they got permission to do this from the Pope, they're called sisters. And they're also another, rather than contemplative, those are active orders because they're active out in the public, or apostolic orders. A mother house is the administrative headquarters of an entire order and often had a novitiate for incoming women who wanted to become part of that way of life. Otherwise, sisters who have been sent out into the field, such as from Le Puy to St. Augustine, live with just a few other sisters and take less stringent vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience because their time is so taken up with their ministry. So many such orders were established in the 1600s. Two of the most well-known are St. Francis de Sales and St. Jane Francis de Chantal's Visitation Sisters, and St. Vincent de Paul's Daughters of Charity. You may have heard of them. They're one of them are well-known groups. The Order of the Sisters of St. Joseph is another example. which was founded in 1650 in Le Puy, France. Their rule authorized them to, quote, practice all the holy spiritual and corporal works of mercy of which women are capable. That's a pretty broad field there. So, but teaching was their primary activity. So they're known as a teaching order, but they also they also found hospitals, orphanages, work in prisons. They do all the normal corporal works. Today, sisters are often referred to as nuns. That's why we get so confused. We don't realize there's a difference. So, and the title of sister, as in Sister Mary Joseph, is applied to all women religious, whether they're nuns or sisters. The biggest differences between them are the types of work their rule allows them to do and their vows. The rule is like the constitution of the order. It defines what they can do. The Sisters of Mercy, concerning vows, they all take the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but then you can add, there are others that have extra vows. So Sisters of Mercy have a fourth vow of service. So if a bishop, usually bishops are in charge of just about everything, if they want an order to do something that's not in their rule, they can say no, they won't do it. The Pope can't even ask them to do it. So I'm not sure how to arrange this. Can you hear? Can you? No.
Not well.
Can you hear? Have you been able to hear me up to now? All right.
Start over.
Okay. The story of the Sisters of St. Joseph of St. Augustine, meaning that they're in St. Augustine, Florida, begins with Bishop Augustin Barreau. He was born in France, but came to America in 1830 to teach at a Catholic college in Maryland. He was very acquainted with American ways, including the practice of slavery. He supported it, but was very critical of the way masters treated their slaves. Contrary to the beliefs held by many slaveholders, Barreau very strongly maintained that slaves did indeed have souls and were human beings. That was one of the big questions of the day. And he even proposed a servile code to outline slaves' rights and their duties. He maintained that a slave owner did not own the slave, but he owned their labor. So that was the distinction he had made. Shortly before the Civil War, Barreau was made a titular bishop, which means he didn't have a diocese, and was sent to St. Augustine. After the Civil War, he sought ways to help the newly freed slaves, particularly St. Augustine's Black Catholics. And they had a lot of Catholics because of its Spanish heritage. In 1870, he became the diocesan bishop of the newly founded Diocese of St. Augustine. Bishop Barreau went to his hometown of Le Puy, France, to recruit Sisters of St. Joseph in 1866. It was right after the Civil War, to minister to the new freedmen. And he told the sisters, this is from a letter that he had written, I have 500,000 or 600,000 Negroes without any education or religion, for whom I wish to do something. And he continued, we must make a beginning by establishing schools, a necessity. The Protestants have anticipated us there. They have opened free schools, which the Negroes attend in great numbers. We must therefore prepare for the contest in procuring religious instructions for this simple and docile race. I got to change that. he went to Le Puy to recruit sisters. Out of the 60 who volunteered for the mission, 8 were chosen. 3 were older, very experienced sisters. This is Sidonia Rasca, who was the Mother Superior of them. Josephine Deliage, and Julie Roussel. They were all basically from the same part of France, which I'll show you in a moment. The other 5 is Céline Joubert, Sister Peter or Pierre Bory, Julie Clotilde Orzac, Sister Clémence Fressignon, and Sister Mary Joseph Courtial. They went, and those 5 were newly minted novices, just like 2 weeks before they left for the United States. They took their vows for that, so they didn't, I suppose, they didn't really know each other that well when they were coming over as this unit. So Sister Sidonie led the group, serving as the Mother Superior, and they were the first foreign missionaries ever sent out from Le Puy, and wrote many letters back to their superiors in France. Now, this book could not have been written in such depth if Bishop Verreau, in recruiting the sisters, had not broken the rules. Specifically, the rule, which was in their constitution, that the Sisters of St. Joseph were to be under a local bishop, and to be the authority over the sisters of the order, wherever it may be. Verreau recruited the sisters from Le Puy, however, and he somehow was able to arrange their coming with the understanding that the sisters in St. Augustine would remain under the authority of the Mother House in Le Puy and the bishop there. Had the sisters been under Verreau as their local bishop, there would not have been the need for them to correspond with the Mother House in Le Puy in such detail, for the local bishop would live just a few blocks away from them in St. Augustine. So as a result of that, and it seems to have had the support of the Pope as well, because he was kept abreast of their progress and how they were doing, and was very pleased. So thank you, Bishop Verreau, for stepping out of the box. Now, they came from Le Puy. Oh, and this is an example of their letters I wanted to show you. The letters were sent from the sisters who were in St. Augustine, and they would go back to the Mother House, where other sisters there at the Mother House would transcribe them, copy them. And so you see, this is a transcription, so it's very consistent, which is helpful when you're trying to read it, but it's also very tiny. And it's in French. Most of them were in French. So that took a lot of time. That was getting help with translation and gradually being able to do more translation myself, which I can't do now, for sure. This is 20 years ago that I did this. So. Anyway, so this is the letter to Mother Sidonie Rasca, and it says it's in the community of St. Augustine, and this is in February 1868. So it's one of the new ones. And they were just there. This is a picture of Le Puy, which is located, it's very beautiful. It's a 13th century city. It's still a city. So this is a picture of it's a way, you come down by, I flew to Paris and then came by the high-speed train down to Lyon, and then up, took a little cog train up to Le Puy, which is up on this, it's the Central Massif, which is this big area. It's a really high plateau, several thousand feet above sea level. And they would, several thousand feet above sea level, and they traveled from there over to Le Havre, and then they took a ship. So Le Puy is a remote part of France located on the Massif Central, a large plateau 2,000 feet above sea level in the middle of southern France, and is a temperate climate. St. Augustine is barely 5 feet above sea level. And aside from its quaint narrow streets and strong Catholic culture, it is quite different from what the sisters were used to, with mosquitoes, heat. You think of their hot woolen habits, which they didn't have like summer habits. They just have the same ones. Unfamiliar food and customs. In addition, they had never seen a black person before. They saw some on the ship when they were making their 3.5-week voyage from Le Havre to New York. And they met a few blacks in the course of that. They were like stewards and things, and they were fascinated by them and liked to listen to them speak because they liked the sound of their voices. So, the main things that they knew about America were that it was avowedly Protestant, and that a nun's convent had been burned in Massachusetts in 1834. So they even weighed whether they would wear their habits or not on this trip, because they didn't know whether they'd be assaulted or what would happen. But they decided ultimately to wear their habits, and they found that people were very respectful of them and took care of them. So I was glad that happened. In spite of these hardships, the sisters were filled with a great love and concern for the freed slaves. They came with hopes to preserve the religious allegiance of the Catholic freedmen and to prepare them to be good citizens of the United States. The sisters were skilled teachers and had a fervent faith, but were sorely hampered during their first year by their limited understanding of American culture, and most importantly, their inability to speak English. Despite Bishop Barreau's own efforts to teach them. There was other accounts that explained that he was missing his 2 front teeth. So can you imagine trying to run from someone who, but it just wouldn't quite come out the way it was supposed to. So, one sister referred to English as that villainous language. So it was a vexing problem for both the sisters and for Barreau. Many sisters mentioned their frustrations with their lack of English skills. Mother Sidonie, the one on the upper left corner, I'll point out to you, is in one letter shortly after she arrived in St. Augustine said, "Oh, how happy I will be when I am able to speak comfortably in English and to go to my good black people and tell them how great is the goodness of God toward his children." On top of that pressure, their mission to St. Augustine was indeed urgent, as Bishop Barreau had told them. The Protestant teachers from the American Missionary Association and other organizations from the North had been teaching in St. Augustine since 1864 during the Civil War and had a huge head start on the sisters. The American Missionary Association was founded in 1846 as 1846 as as an interdenominational, but it soon became congregational. Like the sisters, the AMA missionaries sent letters to their superiors. This is amazing to me that I had letters from both groups. Yes, there's the secretary of the AMA, and that most of the letters were written to him. And so he received the same kinds of letters with the progress and saying what they did and how it was going and things like that. The richness of these two sets of primary sources coming from opposite ends of the religious spectrum adds much depth and insight into their similarities and their differences. Each group believed the other was spiritually doomed. The sisters considered the Protestants to be heretics, and the Protestants labeled the sisters as Papists or Romanists. Hence the title of this talk, Heretics versus Papists. Teaching in Black and White, the book that this comes from, has plentiful references to both sides' letters and their interactions with the freedmen, as well as their thoughts about their experiences in the South. So both were foreign to the South, actually, even though the AMA teachers were from New England. The South was very different. Both the sisters and the AMA missionaries applied stereotypes to the people of St. Augustine. They shared a common disdain of the white people for their laziness, and great admiration for the former slaves for their industriousness and diligence in their efforts to live out their new freedoms. The sisters' first school was started in November 1866, only 2 months after their arrival in St. Augustine, with 20 little black boys. And this picture is, I believe, taken, it's in a corner of the grounds of a building was there, of the grounds of the Mother House in St. Augustine now, today, as it was. By February 1867, there were 60. Started off with 20, and by the next year they had 60. They also taught adult blacks in the evenings for a small fee. I think it was $1. The black children received the same education as that given by the sisters in their free schools for poor white children. At first the sisters could only teach Catholic catechism. But by the second year, they could speak English well enough to teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and social studies, in addition to the Catholic catechism. For academic achievement, the sisters gave the students holy cards or holy medals. The AMA missionaries indeed had a huge advantage over the sisters. When the AMA missionaries arrived in St. Augustine in 1864, they were able to jump right in to academic and religious instructions, and guidance was for performing daily life skills as a free people. This school report from the AMA, this is in Tallahassee. See, the AMA was here, the sisters weren't here. The sisters discussed it, but they never did come. But the AMA school was here. You can see, if you can read it, they had quite a few students, a total of 306 students. And then it broke it down into, most of them were in primary school level. And they taught, there was writing, grammar, history, geography, some of the topics that they taught. And this report is also a indication of how very organized the AMA were. I mean, they had special reports and they're just more structured than the sisters were. So in one of the letters, Harriet Greeley was one of the AMA missionaries, and she described her work. She and her husband were working here in 1864. They were here there early. She described her typical duties in a letter. She said, "I visited among the people from house to house, especially the sick, reading the scriptures, still helping forward these elderly persons who have begun to read the scriptures and look particularly after the poor, for we have had not a few of the very poor. Our house is the resort," as in last resort, "for help, advice, and assistance in their business matters, such as making out their bills, contracts, writing letters, and teaching a few." To recognize academic achievement, the AMA gave out copies of the New Testament, a prized reward as the blacks desired to be able to read more than anything else. They especially longed to be able to read the Bible on their own. Despite their differences, there were similarities between the AMA and the Sisters of St. Joseph teachers. Both groups were made up of primarily single, well-educated, and idealistic young women who cared deeply about their black students. Both groups provided religious and academic instruction for black children and adults, and for poor whites. The AMA focused on teaching how to read the Bible and to become proficient in basic academic subjects and life skills, while the French sisters were limited to teaching mostly Catholic piety until they mastered English. After that, after they learned the language, they provided excellent academic training in their schools for the blacks and the poor whites. Both sides of the contest, though, had their advantages and disadvantages. For the Sisters of St. Joseph, of course, they were Catholic. So they were very well received in St. Augustine, which was a Catholic community. And the only thing they were kind of wondering about was they didn't like the idea of teaching the blacks, but they won them over. I mean, they ended up loving them, and all the work that they did really made a difference. Just in their deportment, they were very keen on the deportment. So they were Catholic, not Protestant. They had been recruited from France by their beloved Bishop Verreau, who had actually earned the moniker of the rebel bishop. So he had stood up for the South, and they liked him a lot. And he was the champion of the South. And as a result, they were loved because they were not Yankees. And they were French. A people whom the South admired greatly. Sister Julie Rossell, one of the older sisters, she had a really dry sense of humor. It was fun to read her. Wrote colorfully of their fascination with all things French. "You would not believe the honor which Americans extend to our beautiful friends. I think they look on her as queen of all the countries in the universe. Everything that is perfect in goodness, beauty, stability, and even holiness comes from France. A family which is sufficiently comfortable to have a regular servant would not want to admit that the servant was not French. A ball gown that does not come from Paris is nothing. The sardines of which they are so fond here are not good if one does not read on the little tin box the name of our French towns." But they also had their disadvantages, of course. They had to rely on the support from Bishop Verreau and their mother house in France at first. Later, they gained some support from Northerners, whom they called the strangers. When we say snowbirds and tourists, but they were called the strangers in St. Augustine, who vacationed in St. Augustine in the winter. And they had money so that they could hold a fair and people could buy it. And so, the people were very, very poor in St. Augustine. So, the sisters held fairs, taught French and lace making. Once they knew English, the sisters established elite academies and charged tuition, which also, the tuition from their St. Joseph academies, that's the main thing that supported them, so that they could offer free schools. And that's standard, that's the way it is with all orders that are active like this. They did not know, it's a disadvantage for them, they did not know American customs or English. And as Catholic immigrants in a Protestant country, they held no standing and were considered outsiders. I think some people would wonder, well, with our modern eyes, why weren't they more active in trying to improve the Black condition there? That was not, they were intent on their Catholic religious affiliation. And also they came from Europe, which was very class-oriented. It was very un-American. They ran into trouble sometimes here in America because of the classes that are more recognized in Europe then. And so they did not make any attempt really to do that, but they just wanted to make them be able to be good citizens and good Catholics. Now the AMA had its advantages. Their schools received support from the federal and local governments and from outside institutions such as the Peabody Society or the Freedmen's Bureau. They could speak American English and were familiar with American culture. Most Protestant Blacks preferred the AMA classes, mostly because of the reading instruction that they were able to offer right from the get-go. But the AMA had disadvantages. They were absolutely despised by the white people of St. Augustine and Jacksonville because they were Yankees, and the whites were afraid that they would spread the poison of their Yankee ways. So, in 1868, one of the AMA missionaries wrote to the headquarters in New York, describing the vitriolic atmosphere in Jacksonville this way. He said, up to within the last 6 months, the old feeling of hatred, arrogance, and spite was observable, often cropping out here and there, sometimes in open insults to Northerners, but more generally in suspicions and insinuations, watching for what they had so long asserted, that Yankees were coarse, inbred, and revengeful. As the opposing missionaries' battle ensued, however, neither the Protestants nor the Catholics addressed the real draw for Black people. The Catholics assumed that Blacks would be attracted to the ceremony and splendor of Catholic liturgical vestments and services. In some instances, they were right. Sister Julie, again, reported that in Savannah, there was a young Black woman who strongly desired to become Catholic. She would come to the sisters each morning and evening for religious instruction and to attend services. One day, she emotionally proclaimed, "Sister, how much she loved pomp and ceremony of the Catholic Church." She said, "I long to be a Catholic. How proud I will be when I am one. I love to go into your church and see your little children dressed white and go and return, and you before the priest greeting him, and also the priest with his beautiful vestments, gesturing and genuflecting. Then he turns and prays, 'Oh my Jesus.'" Sister Julie further described the scene. "That poor woman, in pronouncing these last words, let fall big tears, and taking her apron off to wipe them, she added, 'Sister, by only thinking of it, I feel in my heart something I can't explain. We do not feel that in Protestant churches.'" I'm sure the sisters really like hearing that. There's Mother Sidoni. In 1869, the sisters established a new foundational colony in Jacksonville. That's one of the small little groups that separate from the mother house. Which was a growing commercial town and was indeed very Protestant. By 1871, Mother Sidoni wrote about how difficult their work was in Jacksonville, where beautiful Catholic vestments and ceremonies held no attraction for the local blacks. She said that reaching the blacks there was impossible, and that they should focus on the small Catholic white population in Jacksonville. She explained, "We can do nothing with blacks. All belong to different religions. The population of Negroes is composed of 5,000 souls, of which only 30 are Catholic. They, the blacks, have 8 different churches of their own. Their ministers preach constantly. They have their bishops also. From time to time there are missions of their fashion. They have extraordinary times of prayer. Thus they pass almost the entire Sunday at church. They sing there. One preaches. This lasts until midnight. The devil does his work well there. Truly, without the aid of Satan, the poor people would not be able to resist fatigue." On certain occasions, they resemble fanatics and they make a hellish noise. We have no hope. Both the Sisters of St. Joseph and the AMA missionaries were confounded by the power of blacks' desire to have their own Christian churches, where they could worship as they pleased under their own leadership. The AMA and the sisters underestimated the capabilities and level of agency that the blacks could and did exert. The freedmen began to found their own denominations early on. The African Methodist Episcopal Church, AME, and numerous Baptist denominations. For most Protestant and Catholic churches did not provide a path for ordination for a black clergyman, even after Reconstruction. Some examples of black churches that were established during Reconstruction here in Tallahassee, you probably know these two. Bethel AME, Bethel Mission, that was in 1865, Bethel Missionary Baptist in 1870, and Elizabeth Popular Spring, 1870. The AMA and the Sisters of St. Joseph both had a sincere desire to serve the freedmen, but their motivations were different. Taking from a passage in my conclusion to the book, the AMA missionaries were motivated by a sense of a need to atone for the United States sin of supporting slavery, and, yes, by a desire to instill Yankee values, such as hard work and thrift, as well as to make former slaves good citizens. The Sisters of St. Joseph were motivated by an understanding that their own salvation depended on their obedience to the call to convert others to the Roman Catholic faith, which they believed to be the only true faith. This explains why, even after they mastered English, their emphasis was on Roman Catholic doctrine and piety rather than Bible study, and why they felt so passionate in opposing the Protestant heretics. They were motivated by religious beliefs rather than by political or social concerns about blacks and the future of the United States. After Reconstruction officially ended in 1877, most of the AMA missionaries returned to their northern homes, and as the support from their donors dwindled, people got tired of it. So, the sisters, however, remained and continued to teach poor blacks and white children, establishing separate schools for the poor in accordance with Florida's segregation laws. The elite boarding/day schools, usually named St. Joseph's Academy, were highly regarded. After the departure of the AMA missionaries, the sisters' main rival to attract black congregants briefly became the Episcopalians, who in the 19th century were decidedly more Protestant in outlook than they are today. Most black Catholics remained Catholic, so the Episcopal Church hoped it could attract non-Catholic blacks through their services, which, like the Roman Catholic services, followed a liturgy with beautiful ceremonies that were led by priests dressed in beautiful vestments. Their battle, however, turned out to be in the field of education. The Episcopalians, though, soon found that their schools could not outpace Catholic schools, which had the benefit of the free teaching labor of the Sisters of St. Joseph. Additionally, the Episcopal Church, like the sisters, had to compete with Florida's numerous public schools. Episcopal Bishop John Freeman Young, who sought another way to bring blacks into the Episcopal fold, saw the need for ordained Episcopal black clergymen, and as early as 1869, he ordained a black man from the Bahamas to start a mission in Jacksonville, but he had little success. Bishop Young ordained another black man, Jacob R. Ballard, in 1882 to establish a mission in Jacksonville, again, one which became St. Philip's Episcopal Church, that's there today. Later that year, the bishop sent Deacon Ballard to Tallahassee to establish a mission for blacks. And that became St. Michael's and All Angels, with its parishes there near the FAMU campus. Even so, the Episcopal Church generally could not successfully compete against the rising black denominations. And I like to illustrate this when I'm telling people about this, that here they were, Protestants, Catholic, and meanwhile they're doing all their competition with each other, and then the blacks just went out and started their own churches. Mother Sidoni, who had a very colorful description of Protestant churches. And there, by 1905, the Sisters of St. Joseph established schools and white poor children and elite academies for wealthy young ladies, led to the establishment of 10 foundations in Florida, from Fernandina down to Ybor City. And Miami was the last one in this period, 1905. The others up there, that's some, the book also covers sisters in Georgia who sprang from the mother house here as well, but that's a different story. It's a whole other chapter. So these foundations flourished and were highly esteemed. The sisters, however, encountered a wave of anti-Catholicism that briefly swept across the South in the 1910s. But that adversity led to the establishment of a strong parochial school system and more clarity about the wall of division between church and state. So, who won the contest for black souls and minds? The American Missionary Association, the Sisters of St. Joseph, or the black communities in St. Augustine and elsewhere in Florida? One could say that, hands down, the freed blacks won, for they were given a solid education and used it to establish their own denominations and schools, many of which still remain today. We could do that, but I suggest that they all won. The AMA missionaries succeeded by providing the moral and educational support the blacks needed at that time, though they faded away after the era of official Reconstruction ended in 1877. The Sisters of St. Joseph overcame their obstacles and were largely successful in preserving the Catholic faith among the Black Catholics in Florida and providing a strong education, which was their primary concern all along. As the work of the sisters continued on, in 1898, the Catholic Diocese of St. Augustine built St. Benedict the Moor School for the Black children in Lincolnville, which is the historic Black area of St. Augustine. And in 1911, they built the first Catholic parish, also named after St. Benedict the Moor. And it still serves St. Augustine's Black community. The Sisters of St. Joseph's current rehabilitation of this building is now in ruins. I mean, it's just a shell, basically. And it came in many times for grants, for rehabilitation grants, but now the sisters are funding it through contributions, and they're making headway. They are rehabilitating this to become the neighborhood center of St. Augustine's. It's called a neighborhood center, where they are training poor single mothers, will be when it's finished, to gain training in viable careers so that they can support their families, and how to get the licenses they need, and how to make all the applications, and just nurturing that. They're doing that now, but this will become the center for that. The center is strong evidence of the Sisters of St. Joseph's continuing dedication to the mission that they began in St. Augustine in 1866. I've just shared with you events that are covered in chapter 3 of this book. And I'm sorry to say I cannot sell them, but I don't want to bring some so you can see it, you can examine it, and just take a look at it. It's just this, what I have shared, is just a taste of the book. There's so much more to the story of the sisters' work in Florida and Georgia. Teaching in Black and White describes the lives of these women during their pioneer years, 1866 to 1923. That is, from the mid-19th century and post-Civil War era through the season of American anti-Catholicism in the early 20th century. Its 8 chapters each cover a major event or aspect of the order's work during that time, telling the sisters' story through the lenses of Catholic history, Florida history, Southern history, women's history, and Black history. Through the sisters' letters, we can better grasp what the lives of these women were like as they persevered through struggles and rejoiced in triumphs. I hope that you will want to learn more. You can purchase the book directly from St. Peter's Anglican Cathedral on Thomas Road. There's a bookstore there. Or you can order it online, or with a discount coupon directly from the Catholic University of America Press, or from Amazon.com, or Barnes & Noble. So, and also, I have some display items up here on the table. So as pictures from the Puy, when I went to do research there. I spent 2 weeks there with the aid of a sister who helped wonderfully, helping me get around it with the translations and such. And a display of some of the lace that they would make, and a map to show graphically where Le Puy is. So, and if you brought a book, if you have one and brought one, I'd be glad to sign it. And I just now, do you have any questions?
Excuse me, sorry.
I noticed that you mentioned, excuse me, in the first group there were 30 Negro boys, and in the second group there were 60. Did they educate the girls as well?
They did. That was, their first group were boys, though. They had, yes, girls and boys and adults, men and women. Yes. Oh, she asked if they had girls as well as boys.
My question is about, does the order still receive support from France now, or are they sort of?
Does the order still receive support from friends? No, in a very sad chapter, there is a story of the break from France by the bishop at the time. That happened about 1900. And in fact, the people in France lost all contact with them, and they have like in their archives there, they have like a genealogy tree, and where the different ones that branched off of others, and that one is just blank. I mean, they knew it existed, but so the sister who is the archivist when I began this work, Sister Thomas Joseph, who has since passed, in the 70s, she was the one who restored connections with Lepuy. So when I wrote them and said I wanted to do some research and wondered if I could use their archives, and they were very readily open to it. Yes?
You mentioned that it was difficult for black people to be ordained to the Catholic Church as priests or as part of the clergy. I was wondering what the mechanism was that limited that. Was it from Rome? Was it local? What stopped black people from being ordained?
A lot of it was the southern bishops. What prohibited the ordination of black priests? The attitudes in the South, they didn't have a seminary. They eventually got one, but there's still very few black priests.
Anything else?
Yes.
Are there, other than the order in St. Augustine, are there still orders in Florida or in Georgia or around the United States at all of St. Joseph's?
This is the only one I know of. This is the only one in Florida. The one in Georgia lasted about 50 years, and then it was financially, they couldn't manage it, and they became part of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet, which is based in Carondelet, Missouri, but it's part of St. Louis. Yeah. I used letters from their archives to do the Georgia chapter. The other chapters cover other major events. They talk about just what it was like when they were beginning their own ministry in St. Augustine. Third chapter is this one. Then yellow fever epidemic, that was a major epidemic in Jacksonville, 1888, and in Fernandina before that, 1877, where some sisters did lose their lives. And then just the schools, there's a chapter basically on academies, what was life in the academies. And then the break with France, that's its own chapter. Anti-Catholicism, and then the Georgia story.
If you have any other questions, come on up and talk to Barbara at the end and look at the display on the table. Let's have a big hand. Official bicentennial Tallahassee Historical Society travel mug. That's all right, I'll turn it back on. Thank everyone for coming tonight. We had 65 people registered. We have 80 who showed up, which is just wonderful. We will be back in the main auditorium on January the 11th with Delatry Hollinger and Jacqueline Perkins talking and giving us a tour of the new virtual civil rights museum that they have been working on. It's really something. And of course, don't forget Bicentennial Day, that same day down at the Capitol. So, thank you all very much. Thank you all. And Merry Christmas.